Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around with wide eyes. The space station stretched out before him like something from a dream. Tall crystal towers reached up toward the artificial sky, and strange lights danced across the walls in colors he had never seen before. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked past him, their voices creating a mix of sounds that filled the air. He pulled his old tool bag higher on his shoulder and walked forward. His work clothes were clean but showed signs of many years of use. Oil stains marked his coveralls in several places, and his boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor. The other people around him wore fancy clothes that sparkled and shined under the bright lights. The main lobby of Nexus Prime was bigger than any building Jake had ever seen. The ceiling went up so high that he had to tilt his head back to see the top. Floating platforms carried aliens from one level to another, and holographic signs showed information in dozens of different languages. Everything here cost more money than most planets made in a year. Jake walked toward the reception desk, which was made from some kind of blue stone that seemed to glow from inside. Behind it stood a tall alien with smooth blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her face. Her name tag said Vexthera, and she wore a uniform that looked like it was made from liquid silver. When Jake got close to the desk, Vexthera looked up from her work. Her 4 eyes focused on him, and her expression changed from polite interest to obvious disgust. She wrinkled her nose and took a small step backward, as if Jake carried a bad smell with him. "Excuse me?" she said in a voice that was cold as ice. "Maintenance workers are not allowed in the guest areas. The service entrance is located around the back of the station. I suggest you find your way there before you cause any problems." Jake stopped walking and looked at her with a calm expression. "Actually, I have a reservation. The name is Morrison." Vexthera made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a kind sound. "That is completely impossible. This hotel serves only the most important beings in the galaxy. We host ambassadors, royal families, and business leaders who control entire star systems. Humans of your obvious social class cannot afford even our cheapest rooms." Other aliens in the lobby had started to notice what was happening. A group of tall, thin creatures with golden skin whispered to each other and pointed in Jake's direction. Near the elevator, a family of beings that looked like walking trees turned their attention toward the reception desk. Some of them held small devices that Jake recognized as recording equipment. "Look," Jake said, keeping his voice calm and polite. "I understand there might be some confusion, but I really do have a reservation. I can show you my confirmation number if that would help." Vexthera's eyes rolled in different directions, which Jake found very strange to watch. "There is no confusion here except in your own mind. Humans simply do not belong in places like this. Your kind lacks the basic understanding of proper social behavior that every civilized species learned long ago." She gestured around the lobby with one of her long arms. "Do you see any other humans here dressed like you? Do you see any other beings carrying tool bags and wearing work clothes? Of course not, because this is not a place for laborers and mechanics." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like a credit pad. It was old and scratched, but it worked perfectly fine. "I can pay for my room right now if you want to check my account." Vexthera did not even look at the device. She waved her hand as if she was brushing away an annoying insect. "Please do not waste my time with whatever fake credentials you think you have. Security will be here soon to escort you to where you belong." More aliens had gathered around the reception area now. Jake could hear them talking in their various languages, but he caught enough words to understand they were discussing him. Most of the comments were not very nice. Some of the aliens seemed to think the whole situation was very funny. A distinguished-looking creature, with crystal-like features, walked over from a nearby seating area. His clothes were covered in medals and ribbons, and several smaller aliens followed behind him like servants. Jake guessed this was someone very important in whatever government he represented. I have heard that humans tend to have unrealistic ideas about their place in galactic society, the crystal being said in a voice that carried across the lobby. But this display of delusion is remarkable even for their species. Does he really think he can simply walk into Nexus Prime and demand a room? The crowd around the desk grew larger, and Jake found himself surrounded by aliens who were all much taller than he was. Their voices got louder as more of them joined the conversation about the strange human who thought he belonged in their exclusive hotel. Vexetera seemed to enjoy having such a large audience for her performance. She stood up straighter and spoke in a voice that everyone could hear clearly. This is exactly why the Galactic Council needs to establish stricter controls on human travel. They see one small success in those border conflicts and suddenly believe they are equal to species that have been civilized for thousands of years. She looked directly at Jake with all four of her eyes. Humans are good with tools and machines, I will give you that much credit. But mechanical ability does not equal sophistication or social standing. You should be grateful that your kind is allowed to work on our ships and stations instead of demanding access to places that are clearly beyond your means. Jake listened to all of this without saying anything. He checked the time on his old watch and seemed to be waiting for something. When Vextera suggested that he might be able to find work cleaning the waste disposal systems, he finally spoke up again. I would like to speak with your manager, he said in the same calm voice he had used before. The word "speak with your manager" sent the entire crowd into loud laughter. Jake had never heard so many different types of laughing sounds at the same time. Some aliens made high whistling noises, others produced deep rumbling sounds, and a few clicked their teeth together rapidly. The crystal being who had spoken earlier laughed so hard that his entire body started to glow brighter. Vextera's four eyes moved in circles as she shook her head. The station director does not have time to deal with confused maintenance workers who have lost their way. The very idea that you think you deserve to speak with someone of his importance shows just how little your species understands about respect and hierarchy. She pressed a button on her desk, and within moments, two massive security guards appeared. They were members of a species Jake had heard about but never seen in person. The Corvin looked like they were made from living rock, with thick gray skin that seemed as hard as stone. Each one was at least 8 feet tall, and probably weighed more than a small vehicle. The first guard spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding rocks. Problem here? Yes, Vextera said, pointing at Jake. This human refuses to leave the guest areas, despite being told multiple times that he does not belong here. Please escort him to the service entrance, where his kind is supposed to enter the station. The second guard looked down at Jake and tilted his massive head. You causing trouble, human? Jake looked up at the two giants without showing any fear. No trouble at all. I'm just trying to check into my room. This statement caused another wave of laughter from the crowd. More aliens had joined the group, and Jake estimated there were now at least 50 beings watching the scene. Some of them were definitely recording everything on their personal devices, probably planning to share the funny story about the delusional human with their friends. The crystal being stepped closer to Jake and looked down at him with obvious amusement. Young human, I am Ambassador Creolon of the Altarian Empire. I have been staying at establishments like this for over 200 years. In all that time, I have never encountered a human guest who was not part of a diplomatic mission or corporate delegation. Individual humans simply do not have the resources to afford these accommodations. He gestured around the luxurious lobby with one of his translucent arms. A single night in the most basic room here costs more than most humans earn in several years of labor. The presidential suites cost more than the gross domestic product of some of your smaller colonies. Jake nodded politely. That does sound like a lot of money. Ambassador Creolon seemed pleased that Jake was finally starting to understand the situation. Indeed, it is. Now, I suggest you accept the guard's offer to help you find your way to the appropriate entrance. There is no shame in honest work, But there is great shame in pretending to be something you are not. Vexthera leaned across her desk and spoke in a voice that was loud enough for everyone to hear. This is precisely the problem with humans. Your species fought well in those frontier conflicts. I will give you credit for that. You have courage and determination that many other species lack. But winning a few battles against raiders and pirates does not suddenly elevate you to the same level as civilizations that have been exploring space for millennia. She stood up and walked around the desk so she could address the crowd directly. Jake noticed that she was enjoying the attention and the chance to educate everyone about what she saw as proper social order. Humans have been in space for less than 300 years, she continued. Most of the species represented in this lobby have been traveling between stars since before your ancestors discovered fire. You have enthusiasm and mechanical aptitude, but you lack the cultural sophistication that comes with true advancement. Several aliens in the crowd nodded their heads in agreement. Jake heard comments in various languages that he understood well, enough to know they were not complimentary. Words like primitive, presumptuous, and amusing came up frequently in the conversations around him. A small alien with purple fur and large ears squeaked loudly enough for everyone to hear. My species has been running luxury hotels for over 5,000 years. We have never had a human customer who was not paying with someone else's money. Usually, they are assistants or servants traveling with their alien employers. The first, Corvingard reached out with one massive hand and placed it on Jake's shoulder. The touch was gentle, but firm, making it clear that Jake could either walk out on his own or be carried out. Come along, human. No point making this harder than it needs to be. Jake looked around at all the faces, watching him. Some aliens seemed genuinely amused by the situation, while others appeared annoyed that a lowly human had interrupted their sophisticated evening. A few looked almost embarrassed for him, as if they were watching someone make a fool of themselves without realizing it. You know, Jake said, still speaking in the same calm voice. I've heard that Nexus Prime was supposed to be a place where all species were treated with equal respect. I guess that was just marketing. This comment caused Vexthera to become visibly angry. Her blue skin turned a darker shade, and all four of her eyes focused on Jake with obvious hostility. Equal respect must be earned through equal achievement. Your species has contributed some useful mechanical innovations, but that does not make you equal to beings who have mastered arts and sciences that humans cannot even comprehend. She walked closer to Jake and looked down at him with contempt. You want to know what equal treatment looks like? Go to one of the budget stations in the Outer Rim territories. Stay in accommodations that match your actual social and economic status. Leave places like this to beings who have actually earned the right to be here. The crowd murmured its approval of this speech. Ambassador Creelon nodded sagely, and several other important-looking aliens made comments about the wisdom of maintaining proper standards. Jake checked his watch again and seemed to be waiting for something specific to happen. The first Corvin guard was starting to look impatient and tightened his grip on Jake's shoulder slightly. Last chance, human, the guard rumbled. Walk out nice and easy, or we carry you out. Before Jake could respond, a soft chiming sound came from somewhere behind the reception desk. The soft chiming sound came from the private elevator behind the reception desk. Jake had noticed it earlier, but had not paid much attention to it since it seemed to be reserved for hotel staff only. Now, as the sound continued, everyone in the lobby turned to look at the elegant doors as they slowly opened. From inside the elevator stepped one of the most impressive beings Jake had ever seen. The creature was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of flowing energy rather than solid matter. His robes moved without any wind, and his eyes glowed with a soft white light that was somehow both gentle and commanding at the same time. Jake recognized him immediately from the pictures he had seen. This was Director Zelmond, a member of the Ancient Ethereal Council and one of the most respected administrators in the galaxy. His species was known for their wisdom, their fairness, and their ability to communicate directly with the minds of other beings. Director Zalmond moved across the lobby without his feet seeming to touch the ground. His glowing eyes took in the scene before him, focusing on the crowd of aliens, the two security guards, and finally, on Jake himself. When he spoke, his voice appeared directly in everyone's mind, rather than coming through the air. What exactly is happening at my reception desk? The mental voice was calm, but carried an undertone of authority that made everyone in the lobby stand up straighter. Vexera immediately stepped forward and bowed deeply. Her confident attitude from moments before had completely disappeared, replaced by obvious nervousness. When she spoke, her voice was much higher than it had been when she was addressing Jake. Director Zalmond, sir, we have a situation with a human who is attempting to impersonate a hotel guest. I was handling the matter according to standard protocols for dealing with individuals who do not belong in the guest areas. She gestured toward Jake with one trembling hand. This person claims to have a reservation, but as you can see from his appearance and obvious social status, this is clearly impossible. I have called security to escort him to the appropriate entrance, where he can seek employment in the maintenance departments. Director Zalmond's glowing form moved closer to Jake, and the crowd parted to give him room. The two Corvin guards immediately released their grip on Jake's shoulders and stepped back respectfully. Even Ambassador Krelon moved aside, though he kept his crystal eyes focused on the conversation. And what is your name? Director Zalmond asked, his mental voice now directed only at Jake. Jake Morrison, Jake replied, extending his hand in the traditional human greeting gesture. What happened next caused gasps of shock from everyone watching. Director Zalmond not only reached out and shook Jake's hand, but also performed a formal bow that members of his species reserved for only the most honored guests. The glowing being held the bow for several seconds, which in ethereal culture was a sign of deep respect. Mr. Morrison, Director Zalmond said, his mental voice now filled with what sounded like embarrassment. I offer my most sincere apologies for this treatment. Had I known you were arriving today, I would have personally ensured that you received the welcome you deserve. The lobby fell completely silent. Jake could hear the soft humming of the station's life support systems and the distant sound of alien music from one of the upper levels. But no one in the crowd made a single sound. Vexthera's 4 eyes were wider than Jake had thought was physically possible. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. To most of the aliens watching, it looked like a simple identification badge, but when Director Zalmond saw it, his entire body began to glow much brighter. Actually, Zalmond, you can just call me Jake, Jake said with a small smile, and don't worry about the welcome. I was hoping to see how the staff treats unexpected guests who don't look like they belong here. He looked around at the stunned faces surrounding him. I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed with what I've seen so far. Director Zalmond's mental voice became as cold as the space between stars. Staff treatment protocols. Yes. He turned to look directly at Vexthera, who had gone very pale and was beginning to shake. Miss Vexthera, I believe you should be informed about who you have been speaking to for the past 20 minutes. The director's glowing form rose slightly off the ground, a sign that he was about to make an important announcement. His mental voice expanded to reach every mind in the lobby, ensuring that no one would miss what he was about to say. This is Jacob Morrison, the owner of this entire space station. He purchased Nexus Prime 3 cycles ago, through a network of shell companies based in the Centauri system. Every salary paid to every employee of this establishment, including your own, comes directly from accounts that he controls. The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Ambassador Krelon's crystal features went completely transparent with shock. The purple-furred alien who had spoken earlier about human customers made a squeaking sound and fell backward into a chair. Several other aliens dropped the devices they had been using to record the incident. Vexthera's legs gave out completely, and she collapsed into her chair behind the reception desk. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. Finally, she managed to speak in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "That is impossible. Humans do not have that condo wealth. The entire economic output of the human colonies could not generate enough money to purchase a space station of this size and importance." Jake walked over to the reception desk and leaned against it casually. His calm demeanor had not changed at all throughout the entire incident, but now there was something different in his eyes. The patience was still there, but underneath it was something much harder. "You know, that's where you're wrong," he said, looking directly at Vexthera. "While all of you were busy maintaining your social hierarchies and looking down on species you considered beneath you, humans were working. We were fixing your ships, building your infrastructure, and solving problems that your advanced civilizations couldn't handle on your own." He gestured around the beautiful lobby with its crystal towers and floating platforms. "Every single system in this station runs on technology that was either invented by humans or improved by human engineers. The life support, the artificial gravity, the faster-than-light communication arrays, even the food replicators in your rooms, all of it." Director Zalmond nodded gravely. "Human engineering firms now hold patents on 43% of all essential space station technology. Morrison Industries alone owns the exclusive rights to the propulsion systems used by 70% of all commercial vessels in this sector of the galaxy." Jake smiled, but it was not a warm expression. "Turns out the galaxy pays very well for competence and reliability." The revelation about Jake's true identity spread through the crowd like a shockwave. Aliens, who had been laughing and pointing at him moments before, now looked anywhere except in his direction. Some tried to quietly move toward the exits, hoping to escape before anyone noticed they had been part of the humiliating display. Ambassador Creolon's crystal features had turned completely clear, which Jake had learned was a sign of extreme embarrassment in his species. The distinguished diplomat was frantically whispering to his assistants, probably trying to figure out how to fix the massive diplomatic mistake he had just made. Vexthera remained slumped in her chair, staring at Jake with all four eyes as if she was seeing a ghost. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of her desk, and her blue skin had turned so pale it was almost white. "This cannot be real," she whispered. "Humans are mechanics and laborers. They fix things and follow orders. They do not own space stations worth more than entire star systems." Jake walked around behind the reception desk, and Vexthera immediately scrambled out of her chair and backed away from him. He sat down in her chair and looked at the computer terminal that controlled all of the hotel's reservation systems. "You see this?" he said, pointing at the screen. "Every name on here, every reservation, every payment, it all flows through systems that my companies built and maintain. When Ambassador Creolon booked his diplomatic suite, the transaction was processed by Morrison Financial Services. When that purple alien over there paid for his luxury package, the money went through Morrison banking systems." He turned the screen so that some of the closer aliens could see the information displayed on it. "For the past 3 years, every being in this lobby has been giving money to humans every time they used any kind of advanced technology. The difference is that we never made you feel stupid for needing our help." Director Zalmond moved closer to the desk, his glowing form casting strange shadows on the crystal walls. "Perhaps you could explain to our guests how this situation developed. I believe it would be educational for everyone present." Jake leaned back in the chair and looked around at the crowd of aliens who were all watching him with very different expressions than they had shown before. Fear had replaced amusement, and respect had replaced contempt. "It started about 50 years ago," Jake began. "Human engineers were working on alien ships and stations, learning how everything worked. We noticed that a lot of the technology was old and inefficient, systems that could be improved, processes that could be streamlined, problems that could be solved with some creative thinking." He gestured toward the massive viewing windows that showed the stars beyond the station. So we started making suggestions. Small improvements at first. A better way to route power through the ship's systems. A more efficient method for recycling air and water. Faster algorithms for calculating hyperspace jumps. The crowd was listening intently now, and Jake noticed that many of them were recording again, but this time they were not doing it to make fun of him. They were trying to capture every word of what was turning out to be a very important history lesson. The thing is, Jake continued, most alien species had gotten comfortable with their technology. They knew it worked, so they never questioned whether it could work better. But humans, we always ask, what if we tried it this way instead? That curiosity, that willingness to experiment and improve, that's what made the difference. He pulled up another screen on the computer that showed financial records for the entire sector. The numbers displayed were so large that several aliens made gasping sounds when they saw them. Within 10 years, human engineering firms were being hired by every major corporation and government in the galaxy. We were not just fixing things anymore. We were designing them from the ground up. And every time we solved a problem, we learned something new that helped us solve the next problem even better. Jake stood up from the chair and walked back around to the front of the desk. Vexthera was still standing against the wall, looking like she wanted to disappear completely. Morrison Industries started as a small repair shop on a human colony world, he said, looking directly at her. My father fixed broken equipment for farmers and miners. But he taught me to always look for ways to make things work better, not just make them work again. He pulled out his old tool bag and set it on the reception desk. I still carry these tools everywhere I go, not because I need them for my business meetings, but because they remind me that honest work and practical skills are valuable no matter how much money you have or how important other people think you are. Director Zalman's mental voice addressed the entire crowd. What Mr. Morrison is not mentioning is that his innovations have saved thousands of lives and improved the quality of existence for billions of beings across the galaxy. The emergency life support systems on 90% of all space vessels use Morrison designs. The food production systems that prevent famines on resource-poor worlds were developed by human agricultural engineers. Jake nodded toward the director. We never did it for recognition or status. We did it because problems needed to be solved and we had ideas about how to solve them. The money came later, after other species realized they could not afford to ignore human innovations anymore. He looked around at all the aliens who had been so quick to judge him based on his appearance. Every time you dismissed a human engineer as just another mechanic, every time you assumed we were not smart enough to understand your advanced technology, you missed an opportunity to learn something new. Ambassador Creelon finally found his voice and stepped forward. His crystal features were still transparent with embarrassment, but he managed to speak clearly. Mr. Morrison, on behalf of the Altarian Empire, I offer our deepest apologies for this incident. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss mutual cooperation between our peoples. Jake studied the ambassador for a moment before responding. That depends, Ambassador. Are you apologizing because you realize you were wrong about humans? Or are you apologizing because you just found out that I have money and power? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ambassador Creelon opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again as he realized the implications of what Jake was asking. Ambassador Creelon stood in silence for a long moment, his crystal features slowly regaining some of their color as he considered Jake's question. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter and more thoughtful than it had been before. I believe I am apologizing because I have learned something important about my own prejudices today, he said carefully, and because I realize that my empire has probably missed many opportunities to benefit from human knowledge due to those same prejudices. Jake nodded approvingly. That's a good start, Ambassador. Honest self-reflection is something the galaxy could use more of. He turned his attention back to Vexthera, who was still pressed against the wall and trembling. As for you, I think we need to discuss your future employment status. Vexthora's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Please, Mr. Morrison. I was just following standard protocols. I did not know who you were. If I had known, I would never have treated you that way. Jake shook his head slowly. That's exactly the problem. You should not need to know who someone is to treat them with basic respect and dignity. The fact that you would act differently if you knew I was wealthy just proves that you learned nothing from this experience. He gestured around the lobby at all the aliens who were still watching the conversation. Every being in this room heard you say that humans lack the cultural sophistication to belong in civilized society. You claimed that our mechanical abilities do not equal true advancement. You suggested that I should be grateful for the opportunity to clean waste disposal systems. Vexthera's 4 eyes filled with tears. I was wrong. I see that now. Please, give me another chance to prove that I can do better. I'm sure you can do better, Jake replied. But you'll have to do it somewhere else. You're fired, effective immediately, and you're banned from any establishment that I own or have business partnerships with, which includes about 60% of the luxury hotels and restaurants in this sector. The crowd gasped at the severity of the punishment. Being banned from that many high-end establishments would effectively end Vexthera's career in the hospitality industry. She would have to find work in much less prestigious positions, probably on outer rim stations, where the pay was low and the working conditions were poor. Director Zalman's mental voice addressed the crowd once again. The Ethereal Council will be conducting a comprehensive review of anti-human policies and attitudes across all member species. This incident will serve as a case study in the consequences of allowing prejudice to override logic and fairness. Jake picked up his tool bag and slung it over his shoulder again. I want to make something clear to everyone here. I'm not interested in revenge or in making anyone suffer, but things are going to change, starting right now. He walked toward the center of the lobby so that everyone could see and hear him clearly. For too long, humans have been treated as the galaxy's maintenance crew. We fixed your problems, built your solutions, and accepted whatever scraps you were willing to give us. We've been polite about the insults, patient with the condescension, and grateful for any opportunity to prove our worth. His voice grew stronger and more commanding as he continued. That ends today. Human expertise will be valued appropriately from now on. Our innovations will be credited properly. Our people will be treated with the dignity that every sentient being deserves, regardless of what clothes they wear or what tools they carry. Ambassador Creelon stepped forward again. What you're describing sounds like a fundamental shift in galactic relations. How do you propose to implement such changes? Jake smiled, and this time it was genuinely warm. I'm glad you asked, Ambassador. It starts with education. Too many species have been operating under false assumptions about human capabilities for far too long. He pulled out his old communication device and pressed several buttons. Within moments, the main display screen in the lobby activated and began showing a series of images and data charts. These are the current statistics on human contributions to galactic technology and infrastructure, Jake explained as the information scrolled by. 43% of all space station systems, 67% of all starship propulsion technology, 82% of all emergency life support systems, and 91% of all food production innovations. The numbers were staggering, and several aliens in the crowd made shocked noises as they realized just how dependent they had become on human engineering. The second part of the change involves economic policy, Jake continued. Starting next month, all human-owned companies will be implementing what we're calling the Respect Standard. Any organization that wants to license our technology or hire our services will need to demonstrate that they treat human employees and customers with appropriate dignity. Director Zalman's glowing form brightened with what Jake interpreted as approval. And what happens to organizations that fail to meet this standard? They'll find that human innovations are no longer available to them. Jake replied simply. They can go back to using older, less efficient technology, or they can learn to treat people better. Their choice. He looked around at the crowd of aliens, most of whom were now looking very thoughtful and somewhat worried. I want to emphasize that this is not about humans trying to dominate other species or seeking revenge for past mistreatment. This is about establishing mutual respect as the foundation for all future cooperation. Jake walked over to where the two Corvin security guards were standing. They had remained perfectly still throughout the entire confrontation, but now they looked uncertain about what they should do. You two did your jobs exactly as you were trained to do them, he told them. You responded to a call from the reception desk and acted professionally throughout the situation. I have no problem with either of you. The first guard's rocky features shifted into what might have been a smile. Thank you, sir. We'll make sure to remember this lesson about not judging beings by their appearance. Jake nodded and then addressed the entire crowd one final time. I'm going to go to my room now and get some rest. Tomorrow, Director Zalmond and I will be reviewing the hotel's policies and procedures to make sure that what happened here today never happens again. He started walking toward the main elevator, but paused and looked back at the assembled aliens. Oh, and one more thing. The hotel will be undergoing some management changes over the next few weeks. We'll be promoting the most competent human staff members to senior positions. It's time this place had leadership that understands the real value of hard work and practical skills. As the elevator doors closed behind Jake, the lobby remained silent for several long minutes. Then, slowly, the aliens began to disperse. Many of them talking quietly among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Director Zalmond remained in the lobby, his glowing form gradually dimming as he contemplated the implications of the evening's events. He knew that word of this incident would spread quickly throughout the galaxy, sparking discussions and debates about human-alien relations that would continue for years to come. The mechanic who owned the hotel had just changed everything.